Those of you watching us by stream, welcome to your Christ Universal Digital Experience. From wherever you are tuning in from, it's a joy to be in fellowship with you. We are continuing in our Making the Leap series. As a matter of fact, we've only got one lesson left after today. How has your big leap experience been? Tell the truth now. Remember, you're in church. All right. Very good. Very good. Very good. I said last week or 2 weeks ago, many of you have been sharing your big leap experiences, and I absolutely honor those. It's wonderful to see whenever we take and apply the truth that we get and we see the results in our life, world, and affairs. That's what it's all about in a practical Christianity. Is that right? You sure? All right. Well, let me know it. Let me know it. And so what I want to do today, before we move into the core of our lesson, is I just want to do a little bit of a review, because it's been a few weeks. We haven't had these lessons consecutively week after week. And so I just want to do a little bit of review just to make sure that we are all on the same page. Is that all right? And so we started with this realization, and just by show of hands, how many of you believe that you are capable of getting out of your own way? All right, that's excellent. That's just about all of us. And so really the essence of making the big leap or making the leap and the big leap is just this realization that you and I, to some great extent, are the creators of our experiences. In the words of our founder, we are the thinker who thinks the thought that makes the thing. And sometimes the very thing that we are thinking is the thing that's in our way. Is that right? And so we began by asking ourselves 4 fundamental questions. And those questions were this: am I willing to increase the amount of time? Someone say time. Am I willing to increase the amount of time every day that I feel good inside? You remember that question? The second question was this: am I willing to increase the amount of time? Someone say time. Am I willing to increase the amount of time that my whole life goes well? You remember that question? The next question was, am I willing to feel good and have my life go well all the time? Someone say time. Right? Am I willing to feel good and have my life go well? In other words, am I willing to have my life work for me? Are you with me? The final question that we asked and answered for ourselves was, am I willing to take the big leap into my ultimate level of success in love, money, and creative contributions, or for us in the areas that are congruent with our soul's fulfillment? So am I willing to take the leap? Yes? And as we began to contemplate this process of taking the leap, there was something that was revealed to us. We were introduced to the upper limit problem. Is that right? And when we explored this idea or this concept of the upper limit problem, we learned that the upper limit problem is basically a mind setting that keeps us trapped. There is nothing external from you or I that is keeping us out of our zone of genius. What is keeping me from being what I am designed and destined to be is inside of me. Are you with me? And so there is a mind setting, there is a mentality that keeps me bound. There is a mentality that supports my barriers. There is a mentality that supports the belief that I have that keep me from experiencing what God created me to experience. And so Gay Hendricks offered that when we apply and learn the things that we learn in church on Sunday, I should say that again. When we learn and apply, when we learn and Oh, those are two really powerful words when you put them together. When we learn and apply the things that we hear on Sunday, or when we learn and apply the things that we hear in our JCI classes, when we learn and apply the lessons that we get at teaching in the temple, when we learn and apply, what we will invariably find is that we make some leaps, we make some progress, we find ourselves getting better. Is that right? And now here is one of the things that he helped us to see. He helped us to see that sometimes when we begin to recondition our mental setting and we find ourselves getting better, the better we get, the more uncomfortable we become. Anybody know what that's like? The better you get, the more uncomfortable you become. The more uncomfortable you become, the more you start to ask yourself is this too good to be true? Is it okay to be in a relationship that feels this good? Is it okay to have, I had someone, one of you all come to me just a couple, 2-3 weeks ago. And she had been working her principles. She'd been working the truth that she knows, and she has made the big leap. She wound up leaving her job and started a business, and that business grew multiple times over. It works if you work it. But dig this. She was meeting with me because she'd been working it too good. Working it so good, in fact, that her upper limit problem started to kick in, and she started to experience all of these what ifs. What if the new contracts aren't renewed? What if the new clients don't come back? What if the this and the what if the that? And so I just interjected one thing. I said, well, yes, that is a possibility. But I also said, what if the people who gave you the contracts are so pleased with your performance that they give you more contracts? She's like, well, that would be amazing. And I said, well, both scenarios are purely what ifs. So if there is one what if scenario that robs you of your power and one what if scenario that energizes you and makes you want to go, which what if scenario do you think you ought to be meditating on? It's a pure indication of the upper limit problem at work. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how good can I stand for it to be? Kim, sometimes I just can't take it when it's too good. Especially not if there are some things that are hidden. No, outside. Hear me, put this in your notes. We're not dealing with any external factors, only internal factors. Are you with me? Repeat after me. I am the thinker who thinks the thoughts that makes the things. We're only dealing with what's happening inside of us. There is a saying, if there is no enemy within, the enemy without can do me no harm. Are you with me? So I just want to make sure we're on the same page. So what we have to determine with the upper limit problem is, how good is too good? And one of the things that we cited was that 60% of lottery winners find themselves worse off than before they won. Why? They don't have the mental setting, the mind setting to manage this new increase. Are you with me? And one of the things that we know from our time being taught here is that you cannot correct an issue at the same level of consciousness that created it. Is that right? And so if there is an upper limit problem, I cannot fix that upper limit problem or address that upper limit problem with the same belief system or with the same thinking or with the same feeling that is the root of it. Are you with me? And so we said that one of the things that we must do is we must own our potential. In order to come up out of this belief system, we've got to be willing to own our potential. One of the things I said to you is if you intend to do something you've never done, you have to be someone you've never been. I am living proof of this. When I was in the marketplace, I was in the marketplace as someone who managed construction jobs. You can't run a construction job the same way you run a church. Even though people can be like light switches, doesn't take much to turn them on or turn them off. Somebody should have gave me an amen right there. You know, you know how we can be. But it's a different thing. See, I can't talk to you the way I used to talk to the guys on the job. You have to be someone you've never been. Are you with me? And so one of the things that we have to be willing to do if we're going to make our leap is we have to own our potential. One of the next things that we said we have to do is reprogram our beliefs, because for most of us, it's the fear that is keeping us from making the leap. It's the fear that is keeping us from making the leap. And here is the thing, put this in your notes. 90% of the things that you fear are irrational and are never going to happen. What you are doing is you are working your faith backwards. If you are a worrier, you are a faith-filled person who is working your faith from the negative pole. And if faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, if faith is the perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance, when I am in fear, then I am saying to the universal force, bring me more to be afraid of. Lord, dear Lord, bring me more problems. Lord, dear Lord, bring me more bills than I have money to pay. Lord, dear Lord, bring me more relationships that don't feel good when I'm worrying. Now, it's the same power, just pointed differently. Are you with me? Because faith works. Just a matter of what we're working it on. Are you with me? So then we have to be willing to activate our faith, and we have to walk by faith and not by sight, or in our case, we have to jump by faith and not by sight. Because faith without works is, that's right. So we have to own our potential. We have to reprogram our beliefs. We have to get out of this fear-filled consciousness, and we have to activate our faith so that we can prepare to take the big leap. And so we're ready to take the big leap. But just before we're ready, Gay Hendricks presents these 4 hidden barriers to us. He presents these 4 barriers. These barriers are hidden. For most of us, we don't know that we have this block. See, it's one thing to have a blockage in front of you. If you have a blockage in front of you and you can see it and you can discern what it is, you can address it. Are you with me? It's quite another for the thing that's causing you trouble to be hidden from you. And so he said these hidden barriers keep us from making the big leap. He said the first hidden barrier is the feeling that we are fundamentally flawed, that we are unworthy of that which we have been striving for. Here is what I love about what you learn here is we learn first that there is an omnipresence of God, and we understand and learn that from the omnipresence of God, we are made in the image and after the likeness of God. And if we are made in the image and after the likeness of God, we are not flawed, but in fact, we are divine. Because we have as an inextricable part of us the very same nature out of which we were created. And so even though I make mistakes, I am not a mistake. Even though my judgment is flawed, I am not fundamentally flawed. I might be a poor judge of character, but it doesn't mean that I am that which I am seeing. Are you with me? So I am more than I appear to be. Thank God for that. He said the second hidden barrier is this barrier of disloyalty or abandonment for those of us who have, and many, actually all of us have it to some degree or another, just an inborn, innate sense of loyalty. Most of us have it to the people in our lives. And so when we have this sense of loyalty, that sense of loyalty can impact our ability to stand in integrity with our decisions, with our drive, with our goals, with our dreams, particularly if it means, if I make the leap, will you still like me? And so some of us turn our light down. We turn our light off so that we can be accepted, so that you won't leave me, so that you'll stay connected to me. And anybody who will leave you just because you're great ain't worthy of your company anyway. You should put that in your notes. He said the next barrier is the barrier of believing that more success brings bigger burdens. I like the way Puffy and Mace said it: more money, more problems. And here is what I want to suggest to you. Find out for yourself. Find out for yourself with no equivocation whether or not more success equals more problems. Now, here is what I will tell you. When you go to a new level, it does require more of you. When you decide to go from where you are to where you are to be, it is going to require you to stretch. But that does not mean that you are not capable. It doesn't mean that you're not able. It just means that this level of consciousness is not suitable for your next level of experience. Are you with me? So find out for yourself. Last but not least, he said the fourth barrier was the barrier of outshining. And I just talked about that a little bit. Some of us just dimming our lights so that we can be in company with people who are not letting their light shine. And so you have to decide whether or not turning your wattage down will bring you satisfaction. See, sometimes when you stand out, you have to do it alone. So he said those are the four barriers. And then the Reverend Rod Norton taught us this one last piece that we have to consider before we make the leap. He taught us how to spot our upper limit problems when they show up in our everyday life. He taught us how to spot those upper limit problems. He said one of the upper limit problems that show up in our everyday life is the upper limit problem of worrying. We talked about the worrier already, yes? Worrying is like sitting in a rocking chair. It'll give you something to do, but it won't get you anywhere. He told us that one of our upper limit problems is the upper limit problem of criticizing and blaming. He said this is one of the daily occurrences that sneaks up. And how many of you know that you can't criticize without using your mouth? Or without using your mind? And when I criticize, I am literally taking the life essence and using it as an attack. Here is what I want to recommend that you do. Rather than criticize things that you may or not be able to change, redirect that power to the fulfillment of your exercise and your execution and your expression in your zone of genius. Rather than talk about what's not happening with somebody else, talk about where you're going. Rather than talk about what's not working in them and what's not looking good on them, rather than talking about somebody else's business, put the life and breath that is in the power of your tongue into the expression of what God wants to do through you. I want to challenge you to not waste a single solitary other next breath talking about somebody else's something that you can't control. No way. Are you with me? And so he said, this is how the upper limit problem shows up. He taught us that there's a upper limit problem that shows up in how we deflect. And one of the things that Gay Hendricks says is that deflecting prevents us from being able to honor the genius when it shows up. You know what I mean when I say deflecting, right? You wake up, you know you're going to church, or you know you're going to the club, whichever, or you're going to church after the club, however you got to get down how you live. But at any rate, you spend some time getting ready. You put your, whatever it is, Helen, that helps you get to your nines so that you can be dressed to the nines. And you get your fly swaggy all the way up. Your drip is just right. And then someone comes to you and they say how beautiful you look, or how nice that tie is, or how fantastic that dress is, and how it just drapes on you, and the first thing you say is, this old thing. When you know the intention was for you to feel good in what you're wearing. So why deflect when somebody identifies with the intention you set? It's one of the ways we obstruct ourselves. Are you with me? One of the other ways he taught us that we obstruct ourselves is by fighting. Well, no. Gay calls it squabbling. I want to call it fighting. Here's why squabbling doesn't quite work. Because if you are someone who, in your past or in your childhood, if you had to fight for attention, or if you had to fight to be heard, or if you had to fight to get the last piece of bread, or if you had to fight to get out, or if you had to fight to be noticed, or if you had to fight to break through, then you might have developed a pattern of fighting. Here is what I want you to know. I want you to remember that this is the difference between the power of the principle and the power of your patterns. See, sometimes, or not sometimes, you can apply the principle regardless of where you are. But sometimes patterns that we use at one level are inadequate for the next level. So if you are a fighter and you've been fighting all your life, at some point in some place, you don't necessarily have to fight, but fighting is what you know how to do. And if you are a fighter needs somebody to fight with. And so you find your allies, people who are intended to help you, and because you're a brawler, you get that Vaseline and you rub yourself down real good and you fight experiences that are supposed to bless you. And so then we get to where we are today. And the questions that we've asked ourselves at the beginning of this journey, the question was, am I willing to increase the amount of time? Somebody say time. Am I willing to increase the amount of time every day that I feel good? Am I willing to increase the amount of time? Someone say time. That my whole life goes well. Am I willing to feel good and have my life go well all the time? Someone say time. See, one of the best capturing of time that I've heard is the poem by Dr. Benjamin Mays, who said, I've only just a minute, 60 seconds in it, forced upon me, can't refuse it, didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I abuse it, give an account if I abuse it. It's just a tiny minute, but my life is in it. And so many of us wind up wasting the precious time, and the one thing that you cannot get a second shot of is the second that you didn't take advantage of. The one thing you cannot get back is the time that you wasted. And so he presents us with this concept of evolving from Newtonian time to Einsteinian time. I don't want to get into all that. What I really want to say is this. I want to keep it real simple. I want to keep it 119th Street. Is that okay? I want to keep it 119th Street in Ashland. What do you do with the time that you have? Are you spending it doing things that help answer the questions that you said yes to. Is what you're doing with your time adding to the amount of time you feel good all the time? Does what you do with your time, the people you are spending your time with, there is a story in the Gospel of Matthew where there is this Canaanite woman who comes to Jesus. And as she nears Jesus, she begins to shout out to him and she says, "Jesus, I need your help." She says, "My daughter has a demon. My daughter has something wrong with her." And Jesus does something that's just kind of cold-blooded, particularly since helping and healing people is clearly in his zone of genius. He does something that's striking to me. When the woman calls out, he ignores her. She is persistent to her outcome. She is persistent to her attention. And so she says again, "Lee, there's something going on with my daughter. I need your help." And the disciples like, "Jesus, just can you go ahead and tell her no already? Send her away. She's making too much noise." Now, this time he didn't just ignore her. This time he said, "What I have is not really for you." See, if you see, the fact that you have time does not mean that everybody deserves your time. The fact that you have a minute does not mean that you ought to stop and hear what somebody has to say in that minute, particularly if you are not sure as to whether or not what they have to add or what they came to take is consistent with your intention to feel good or to feel God. Because sometimes people show up and they don't bring the intention to help you feel God. Are you with me? And so, and there is a lesson on both sides. I want to make sure we get it. I want to make sure we touch it, because she does not take no for an answer. She says, "Even the dogs get the crumbs from the table." And now she's got his attention now. See, sometimes people keep on and they get your attention the wrong way. She got his attention the right way, and then he says, "I have not seen this kind of faith. So go, because your daughter is made well." See, what you have to be able to do also is, if you have an intention to experience your zone of genius, you've got to be willing to press through. You've got to be willing to take another step or try it again when they ignore you, or when they say this is not for you, or when they tell you that you don't fit, or when they tell you that this is you're not a part of this crowd. You've got to be willing to push through just one more time if it means that much to you. Let me say it to you this way. If healing helps you experience your zone of genius, don't settle for the diagnosis. You've got to be willing to keep pushing. You've got to be willing to help your soul understand what it is you need, because sometimes even you don't know what you want. That's the challenge with criticizing. When you're criticizing, you're really saying to your internal self, "I'm not sure about what I want," because if there is no enemy within, the enemy without can do you no harm. There is no person outside of you criticize. You only criticize the reflection of yourself. Can I help you this morning? And so you've got to be clear about how it is you are guarding your time. You have to guard your time. You have to guard your time. You've got to guard your time. See, we all make time for what we think is important in our lives. And one of the things that I think Gabe points out beautifully in the book is he says we have to stop blaming time. See, it takes courage to say to someone who wants a moment of your time, it takes courage to say, rather than saying, I don't have time, it takes courage to say, I can't do that right now. But what he suggests that it does, and I agree, is it gives you and I the ability to reclaim the time that we do have. So if you don't feel like doing it, don't blame it on time. Just go ahead and say, that's not on my agenda to do right now. Call me later. See me tomorrow. Doggone telemarketers call up and think they supposed to just have my time. Mr. Wells, do you have time? No, I don't have time. That's my old thinking. My new thinking is, no, I don't want to talk to you right now. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. So let me just give you some keys. Let me give you some keys to how you can guard your time. Let me give you some keys. The key to guarding your time is guarding your actions. The key to guarding your time is guarding your actions. I asked you earlier, does what you do increase the amount of time you feel good? Ask yourself, do the actions help you accomplish what you set out to do for that day? You have to guard your time. In order to guard your time, you have to guard your actions. You have to guard what you give your activity to. The average person watches 6 hours per television every day. No judgment. But if we would just take one of those hours, we could immediately catapult ourselves into our zone of genius. You and I, this year alone, we're going to spend 27 hours at a stoplight waiting for the right light to come. What are you doing with those 27 hours? I've only just a minute, 60 seconds in it. Forces upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to me to use it. Give an account if I abuse it. I must suffer if I lose it. Just a tiny minute. But eternity is in it. How do you get the most out of your time? The key to guarding your actions is guarding your decisions. When you make a decision, you have to ask yourself, is this decision consistent with the actions I want to take that'll help me get to where it is I want to go? See, it all just drills down. Are you with me? The key to guarding your decisions is guarding the intention you have toward your purpose in life. Let me give you just 3 questions when it comes to you answering your purpose. Why am I here? What do I want? And where am I going? Because if you don't know where you're going, my guess is you'll arrive at the wrong place. Each and every one of us has a purpose. Raise your hand if you have air in your lungs. Yes, those are all people who are full of purpose. Are you with me? So you've got to work on yourself. The next thing we have to do in order to manage our times is we got to be able to deal with the interruptions, the distractions, and the disappointments. We got to be able to deal with the interruptions, the distractions, and the disappointments. One of the greatest gifts you can give someone is your time. And when you give it to them, you can never get it back. So you've got to be mindful about what I call time thieves and time vampires. Stephen Covey had this formula for how he determined what things are urgent and what things are important. I want to offer it to you. It's a little bit inconsistent with what Gay is suggesting, but I'm suggesting that this works. It works if you work it. So he said that one of the things we have to be able to do is identify the things in our lives that are urgent, identify the things in our lives that are important, identify the things in our lives that are urgent but not important, and identify the things in our lives that are important but not urgent. Here is what I want you to know. Taking care of your health is important. It's not necessarily urgent, but it's important. Nurturing your relationships is important. It's not necessarily urgent, but it's important. Being able to identify the opportunities when they present themselves are important. Not necessarily urgent, but important. Now, here is the thing. When we neglect things that are important, they soon become urgent. And Herb, if I haven't managed my current crisis or urgency, and I get more urgency on top of that urgency, are you with me? So we've got to be willing to deal with the interruptions, the distractions, and the disappointments. Last but not least, we have to take time to be creative. We have to take time out. If God is the creator, and if we are made in the image and after the likeness of God, then there is a creative capacity within each and every one of us. But we have to be willing to take time to be creative. See, sometimes we can't hear the seed idea because we're too busy doing this and doing that. And when you have things that are urgent and important, or when you waste time, or when I waste time doing things that are not urgent or not important, I'm still in the flow of doing. And there's always more to do. And so then when you need me, I've got to do this. And when I need you, we got to do that. And before we know it, we're all just standing around with a huge pile of doo-doo. Because there's always going to be one more thing to do. But I want to encourage you to take a moment to come apart and to get in touch with the creative capacity of God within you. Because it's possible that what you need is not something more to do, but you need the right idea. See, this thing that I hold up now didn't always exist. As a matter of fact, it came forth out of someone's intention to be open and receptive to the God idea and the creative capacity of God dropped in the soul of the open vessel, the idea for the iPhone. And that idea has revolutionized how we live and has made some folk incredibly wealthy. What ideas are waiting for you, but you haven't yet come apart? One of the other fascinating things about this here iPhone is that every now and again, it'll shut itself off. If I don't turn it off, and if I don't close the apps, if I don't give it an opportunity to not do, it will, by the intelligence of the design, create the space to not do. And when it decides to not do, there is nothing I can do to make it do. And so I want to encourage you to follow the creative design that was born out of the DNA of the divine that rests in you. See, that process is not unique to the phone, it's unique to you, and they modeled how this works after how you work. So what creativity is waiting to express through you if you will but take the time to be creative, to shut your screen down, to shut your apps down, to shut your doing down, so that God can download and upload that's ready to explode. So I'm inviting you to take your big leap, because what God has in store for you, eyes haven't seen, ears haven't heard, neither has entered into the heart of mankind what God wants to express through you. God bless you.